Welcome to Business as Unusual. This is the live stream where we explore the pressing issues and emerging trends that are shaping the business landscape. We are so excited to answer some of the questions that we received in advance, but we're hoping to make this session today interactive. So if you have any additional questions, please add them to the chat and I'll try to get to all of them during today's session. I am Kathy Steele. I'm the CEO of Red Caffeine, and I will be your host today. And for those of you that have not heard of Red Caffeine or you're unfamiliar, we are a growth consultancy and we build and execute go to market plans for ambitious mid market organizations. So, our service offering includes a fractional team that is led by a senior level marketing executive, and it enables your business to scale rapidly without hiring a wide range of full-time staff members. I personally belong to a number of leadership groups, CEO forums, and such, and there's rarely a session that there isn't someone in our group raising a question about their people or workforce, things that are going on. And interestingly, of late, we've been working on more and more employment brand, learning and development initiatives, and company culture with our current clients. So I really feel like people are starting to get the memo that today's knowledge economy, our most scalable advantage isn't what we are doing or our capabilities, but it's really who we can attract in terms of our workforce, our people, that we can develop and inspire. Talent's really that living, breathing engine for any business. And in many ways, it's becoming far more strategically valuable than other things that we place value on in our organization. So while data might be the most powerful resource, talent is the most leveraged asset. So today we're going to talk about a lot of things that we are seeing that have gone on in our workforce. I think the year started off with a lot of change to HR, just with our new administration and some of the changes, at the state and federal level. But we are so fortunate. We have someone who's got their finger on the pulse of over 1,200 companies, and she sees firsthand workforce triumphs and challenges. Mary Lynn, welcome back. She's the CEO of HR Source. Could you give our audience a little bit of a personal intro about you, HR Source, and then we always love hearing what's going on, either personally or what's interesting that's not on your bio.
Thanks so much, Kathy. You know, I enjoy these opportunities to work with Red Caffeine and to address our listeners with regard to what's going on in the world from the perspective of HR issues. So, as you mentioned, I'm with HR Source. We're an employers association. We're very close to adding our 1,300th member. So,
Wow.
we are so excited about that big milestone. We've been serving Illinois organizations starting in manufacturing, but now serving a diverse array of industries, libraries, park districts, banks, restaurants, municipalities. The list goes on and on of all the industries we represent for 127 years. So since the late 1800s, we have had the privilege of working directly with employers to try to improve their business operations, to try to help them get the most out of their people resources, that important asset that we have to leverage, helping them comply with all of the state, federal, and local employment laws, compensate and provide benefits that are attractive to today's employee. So, again, a lot is happening. It's been an interesting start to the year. I've been at HR Source going on 35 years and have been in this spot for a quarter of a century. So, have seen a lot, and it continues to be an exciting and an evolving area of business. Never a dull moment. From a personal perspective, what's not on my bio probably is how much I love to travel. I know you and I have that in common, Kathy. So my friends tease me that there's rarely a place that I don't like. I can find the beauty in almost any location. I'm a small town Iowa girl, so from a farm to the big city, almost every part of the world. I enjoy visiting. I think I'm an expert at leisure travel, so combining business and leisure. Anytime I'm destined to go somewhere for work, I try to add a little time on the front or back end to try to find a way to embrace something cool about the place I'm at, even if it's not a particularly popular place to travel. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I love that. I honestly feel like the love of travel and exploration of different, even in our, the US culture, or if you're fortunate enough to get to experience, being out of the country and the cultures there, it's so, it's like almost the same kind of learning ground around workforce, because there's complex dynamics to sort of assimilating different cultures and travel. So I think it's perfectly complementary to both of the types of things we actually do for a living. So, well, but let's start kind of to dig into the topic today. I think, it's kind of, I feel like it's not a new dilemma, but it's a complicated dilemma, and it's becoming ever more complicated. That balance of what do our employees want and what do we need to run our businesses, and I think the value that you bring to the marketplace is having sort of that lens of both what you're seeing in the industry groups you belong to, but then you guys do a lot of polling and surveying and communications with your member organizations. And so you recently conducted a pulse survey. It was, with a smaller segment and audience. But what were some of the biggest things that you saw in that feedback, or that those answers that kind of tell us, what's going on today, that what's most critical today in terms of that kind of push pull between workforce and what businesses need?
Yeah, so last week we pulled together our HR Source Advisory Council, which is a group of really important volunteers that come together a couple times a year for HR Source. They're active users of our services from a wide array of industries, and they help kick the tires on the services we're providing, talk to us about what's happening in their environment, what's keeping them up at night, how we could help them more. So we did a quick pulse survey. We had 53 respondents, and I would say that the results were more optimistic than I expected them to be. So, more of the participants said their business had not yet been impacted negatively by what is going on in the external environment. More of them were either seeing business steady or increasing. And the majority of them were also in a wait and see mode as it relates to taking any significant action that was different than the plans they had made at the end of 2024. So that to me was very encouraging, that employers are eyes wide open, but they're not yet, and I'm painting with a broad brush, but generally speaking, they're not yet seeing super extreme actions necessary to reboot and readjust. But they're all cautious and ready to take more action should the circumstances warrant that.
Yeah, it feels very similar to what I'm hearing in my leadership forums. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are emerging, and they're like really heavily investing in their workforce, and hiring, and then others that are more established and stable businesses. I feel like they're taking a measured approach, unless you're super reliant on sourcing from some of the companies that are expecting really, really high tariff. I think that has been what I've kind of heard from my forum groups and other CEOs. I felt like there was a lot of drama, like even earlier this year. I remember us talking in January as we were starting to think about what we wanted to address this year in our content strategy for Business as Unusual. And it feels like that chaos, or that kind of heavy flux that we were in has sort of settled down in the second quarter, and now we're just kind of waiting to see what truly gets actioned.
Right. And I think it's going to be unique to each organization depending on your industry, geography, your talent needs, the specifics of your business, the metrics or the signs that you're looking for before you make changes. So, for years, people have been talking about this pendulum shift. Like, does the power reside with employers or with employees? And I think there was a lot of maybe hopefulness on behalf of employers that the power shift was going to come back to employers. And again, from what I'm seeing, it's balancing out a bit. It's not firmly on one side or the other. It's kind of like here in the middle, which I don't think is a terrible place to be. I think it means employers need to be on top of their game, and so do employees, as well as job seekers and candidates, that people need to be eyes wide open. They need to be reading the tea leaves. They need to be understanding the dynamics of the business environment as it impacts their industry. And there are many industries that are still probably going to have a pretty tough 2025, right? Or beyond. And some have already figured out alternative revenue sources and other ways to stratify their approach to business, or have found a way, various ways to lean out a bit if necessary, or be more cautious with their spending. So I think it's definitely going to be varied, but the pendulum isn't firmly on one side or the other from where I sit.
Yeah, and I feel like um, I feel like it's right. I do feel that it was very challenging in those years where it was so tight, and you had employees that were great that you invested in and loved, and they were getting snatched up for way beyond market value, and that was tough. And I think there's still those outliers that happen, but um, I do feel like, we are in a different place as an economy, and we do have to have a like adjusted frame of thinking about how we all work. I mean, there's things that I'm doing in my business that I never would have done 10 years ago, but there's been so much value added back to my personal life because of it. So I think it can be good for everyone involved, and not just for the business leader or the workforce, that there's a little more balance. I guess, like one of the things that is happening in our economy is, especially in the mid market, is this aging leadership. It's been coined the silver tsunami. There's a lot of things going on with these older aging leaders, in terms of leading or leaving their organizations, if they're founders or they're family led in some way, shape, or another. There's even, that flex retirement aspect of, aging leadership. So what talk us a little bit about what you're seeing there, and how, this is impacting some of the organizations you're working with.
So I'm a glass half full person, and as you well know, so I think what is challenging for organizations is many are not addressing this issue soon enough, right? If you're planful, and if you're open, and if you're transparent, and it can be a very positive time for your organization. It can allow for developmental opportunities. It can give people who have been loyal to your organization an opportunity for growth and upward movement. It can be a wonderful time to really breathe new life into the organization with new ideas and creativity and innovation that can come from a new breed of talent in your organization. But for those organizations who deny that this is coming in their future, who are holding on for dear life, who are not opening up the doors of opportunity or providing the chance to mentor or to promote those within their organizations, they're at risk of losing talent who might think, how long am I going to wait around? Like, how long is this going to take? And why is no one sharing what's happening behind the scenes? Why is no one talking about this or admitting this? Succession planning is more of an art than a science, but it takes a willingness to address the issue at hand, talk openly, look at various options. I know there are lots of options. One is obviously to sell. Another is to promote from within. I mean, there's lots of different types of organizations to sell to, right? You can sell to private equity, you can sell to a competitor, you can sell, if you're the parent, you can sell to your children. But I think what the data shows and what experience shows is that a lot of owners and leaders underestimate how challenging and how time consuming and resource intense this transition can be. And so do not give it enough time, energy,
Yeah.
or commitment to do it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it so much firsthand. We do work with lots of mid-market organizations. We do work with a lot of family-owned businesses. So it's really like all kinds of different issues have been coming up. But I agree with you being more planful. I think even, owners of private companies knowing how many options there are available to them, and then really being a part of the solution in thinking about what legacy they want to leave behind, aside from getting what they truly deserve, that value out of that asset that they've been investing their love and breath, blood, sweat, and tears in it. I don't think any employee would feel like the owner doesn't deserve some outcome for their investment of time and likely a lot of their own personal resources to get a business off the ground and flourishing. But so much of it's done in secrecy, or so much of it's done at such a late stage of the leaders, time, really in the right position. There's so much tribal knowledge around key leaders that we see the aftermath be really challenging regardless of the exit, whether it's voluntary or unexpected, or you do sell to private equity. I think we've just seen firsthand some of the negative impact that has happened because it's been fairly secretive and not very planful and not more shared widely. So personally, I don't understand why it can't be talked about. I think it just makes so much sense. Do you want to be working for somebody that doesn't have, some type of plan for what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years? So I think, I'm hoping that founders and family-led organizations will be more open to exploring that and having, more open conversations with their teams about their plans. But is there anything that you're seeing? Like, are you seeing anything in specifics around the impact? Like, what have you guys seen in terms of like a unexpected takeover and the impact it's had on culture or systems or retaining talent?
Yeah, so we've seen a whole range of things from organizations that do it very well, who either have an internal plan that they are very open and transparent with and execute the transition. I would never say seamlessly, because that's an ideal that I think is all but impossible to achieve. But effectively is a bar I think many organizations can reach. To the opposite side of the continuum, which is a complete and utter disaster, where either an organization loses a key leader or a group of key leaders due to a death, an illness, or something, and the whole organization goes into a state of disarray. Family members, you know, have infighting, there's no control, there's no leadership, there's very little documentation of processes, customer relationships fall away. So, and then there's everything in between. mean, I would highly recommend. There are so many specialists out there, certified exit planners, bankers, lawyers, business consultants, organizations like yours and mine that can play a really vital role in helping organizations be more planful, be more open, figure out what some of the important steps are, how to communicate with their team members, how to develop talent or go to market and find talent if they don't have it, how not to get stuck with one unpleasant option when there could be many options if you provide the opportunity for more time, more involvement, and get help earlier in the process. I mean, we're all aging. I mean, the days go slow, but the years go fast, right?
Exactly. And it's sort of interesting because it doesn't even have to be a family business. I've seen partnerships. I've personally had a partnership divide. So it is really interesting how much those types of shifts impact your team, your culture. But it can be a really strong competitive advantage to we just did an acquisition integration, and it's going to be a massive advantage for our client. But because they were very planful, or had a plan for how to communicate it to their internal team and how to communicate it to their customer base and their supplier base, I think it's gone exceptionally well. It is really heartbreaking, because I don't think, no matter what you get in terms of your check, when you see your business that you work 30, 40, even 15 years at get completely decimated, no former leader takes pride in seeing something like that happen to their culture or business. So I think it's just, I hope we continue to see an evolved perspective on not being so secretive, feeling open to learning options for that, and investing, like you said, in the right resources and team to help you through those types of major leadership transitions.
So we do a lot of employee opinion surveys, and communication is traditionally, historically, one of the lowest scoring
Yeah.
areas for every organization. And in a lot of organizations, um, what the employees are asking for is more access to leadership and more insights, even if they don't have an impact on what decisions are made, and understanding of why. They want to know more about the why and insights into what in leadership is considering when they make decisions. And we see that industry, it doesn't matter what industry, these comments are in almost every survey we do. We want more communication. There's really usually a tight communication in companies with strong cultures between supervisors and their employees, or managers and their direct reports. But employees are also looking for information from top leadership. What are the plans for the future? What are the three major goals for the year ahead? Who are our major customers? What are our biggest strengths and our weaknesses? What keeps you up at night? So the more leadership can make themselves available, either in small groups, one on one, or in town hall type sessions, to be open to answering these questions, showing some of their vulnerability, talking to their teams about what their challenges are, but also what the opportunities are, I think all accrues to the good and can get leaders more comfortable with the benefits and advantages of being open instead of being scared to share things, right?
Yeah.
I think that's been a real positive in the last 20 years, 10 years, even post pandemic, that an openness about what's happening in leadership and with the business overall, and employees wanting to know. Because if you keep everything a secret, people often think the worst. And
Right.
so you may have great plans for people and know that the future is bright, but if all they see is that you've terminated a few key positions or a few employees who they thought were superstars decided to move on to other opportunities, they could fear for their own jobs and think, yeah, wow, this ship is sinking. I think I'm going to take another opportunity. So lean into those opportunities to communicate as much as you can, as often as you can, and you'll reap the rewards.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I do feel like, it is challenging. I love that communication comes up a lot because I think we try to advocate for, communication, internal communication strategies are super important for all organizations, especially if you're doing something new or transformative in your organization. And we will all be doing those types of things with some of the things that are going on today. But another hot button that we hear about is the word flexibility. That our workforce is looking for flexibility. I recently heard a leader talk about the fact that people, they just can't find people like them that, wanted to do X or be at the office and are going to put other things aside. But flexibility doesn't mean just work from home. It means something really different to lots of different organizations. So, what are some of the things that you're seeing employers provide to meet the expectation around flexibility?
Yeah, it's such a hot topic, Kathy. So, in the survey we did with our advisory council last week, one of the questions was please identify the top three priorities of current job seekers. Pay was number one,
Which is
and
interesting because I haven't always seen it be number one. So
it
that's
was number one by quite a ways. But number two, three, and four were good work-life balance, remote hybrid work opportunities, and flexibility in work hours. So two, three, and four. Benefits, pay time off, and vacation time and health benefits came in seven and eight,
wow. Wow.
which to
Okay.
me was surprising. So spots two, three, and four had to do with flexibility. So flexibility about where the work is done, whether that's just working from home or working from your camper out in Montana, working on vacation, working in the middle of the night, or wherever suits you well. So where work is done, when work is done, how work is done. Like, do you really need it to be contiguous hours? Like, are you okay with someone working, from 5 to 7 a.m. before their kids wake up, and then again from 9 to 11, and then pick up a kid from kindergarten or preschool? Are you, is that a possibility to split up a 6 hour or an 8 hour or a 10-hour day? Are you comfortable with, four tens or with three 12 and a halves, right? How much flexibility are you willing to give? And what we're hearing a lot more about is how can we provide flexibility in environments that traditionally couldn't figure out a way to provide
Right.
flexibility. So in a retail environment, a manufacturing setting, how can we find ways to offer and provide flexibility to be able to be more attractive? Because the data shows if your job posting speaks to flexibility or remote work, the number of applicants skyrockets.
It's so interesting. Well, I mean, I believe it. I think the ship has sailed where like we're going to enforce people coming back to an office when they haven't been expected to be back to an office and have everyone get really excited about that. But what about some of the, leave policies? There are some, actual laws that can be broken when you're not properly allowing, maybe in a manufacturing setting, somebody taking home assembly work or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about those
Oh,
details?
yeah. So, I mean, the employment laws still need to be complied with. And as we spoke about before, there's federal, state, and local laws. Illinois, we're not quite as bad as California, but we have a lot of employment laws. There are some new paid time off laws that have gone into effect. There's also pay transparency laws where our job postings, as you know, need to include pay and benefits information. When you have non exempt employees, people who are not exempt from overtime laws, There are specific guidelines in Illinois related to break times, lunch times. There's the 1 day rest in seven law that still applies. And employers, no matter where the work is being done, need to still be alert and aware and compliant with these laws. So a lot of organizations have gotten a little loose with their compliance efforts, really post pandemic, during the pandemic. But they need to make sure that they are knowing where work is being done, having employees track their hours. Even exempt employees in Illinois, employers are responsible for knowing how many hours they are working each week. That needs to be documented. Not as specifically, people don't need to, swipe at a time clock or punch in and out of a time clock, but technically, to be in compliance with Illinois law, exempt employees also need to, employers need to know how many hours, even though exempt employees aren't paid hourly, their exempt employees are working. And a lot of exempt employees feel they're above this. A lot of organizational leaders don't want to be tracked, so they feel like they don't want to track their employees. I'm just the messenger, so just telling organizations what the law is. So be conscientious. I've heard the argument lately that um, because there's been so much downsizing in the government, oh, there's no one at the IRS, there's no one at the Illinois Department of Labor, there's no one out there to audit or check on these things. Sure, there's been a lot of downsizing in the government, and they might not be out performing random audits, but if an employee is disgruntled, and either exits your organization or is still at your organization, they can still file a claim. And when a claim is filed, an investigation ensues. And that is often when your lack of compliance with record keeping and with practices that are required is going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, I mean, I would also echo just, being prepped for if you are thinking about selling your business, having really good record keeping in every aspect of your organization from sales to HR is really, really mission critical for our organizations, because those are the things that get picked apart in the diligence process or the due diligence process. So I appreciate you expanding on that. I think the other thing that really came up a lot earlier this year was DE&I initiatives. Can you just talk a little bit about, what you're hearing from leaders on that topic?
Yeah, it's a pretty emotional topic for many organizations because whether or not they were government contractors. So if they were government contractors or subcontractors, the executive order requiring affirmative action was revoked, and so affirmative action for minorities and female no longer exists in its former format, but also DE&I programs were termed illegal. So we are still waiting for guidance on what an illegal DE&I program is. So that is TBD, to be determined. Many organizations are faced with a challenge of not wanting to leave their principles and their values and maybe even their mission on the sideline, or to not focus on it because their stakeholders, whether that be board members, customers, clients, the communities they serve, or their own employees, they want to be able to continue to say that we feel strongly about not only complying with the law, but doing more than that. But we want to make sure that our organization is inclusive, that our organization is diverse, that we have an equitable, we practice in equitable ways. But there's, currently a lot of questions about what is acceptable, what is appropriate, what is potentially going to cause an inappropriate or unwelcome spotlight on our organization. And so it's been an interesting and a challenging time, and many organizations are facing more questions than answers about what the right thing to do is for them. Like, what is the intersection between their values and principles and what is legally acceptable given the new administration and a lot of the things that have been happening there. So, we at HR Source are doing everything we can to keep our finger on the pulse of this really complicated area, writing lots of articles, watching Washington, D.C. closely, watching what's happening in Illinois, because I think there's a strong chance that in blue states, we might see more state guidelines, laws, regulations crop up in areas that are no longer required or even allowable on a federal level.
Yeah, it's I've got such mixed emotions about this topic. I firmly believe that you should earn everything, but I do feel like inclusivity and getting lots of perspectives is so valuable. So I am I will be watching. I don't know that we've ever instituted, wide practices that have truly addressed this in such a meaningful way that we're seeing, you know, amazing change. So I'm just, kind of curious to see where this will go, because it is such a there's so many layers to this topic, and it's so complex. And I have, just really mixed emotions about, what's to come. So
Mhm.
sort
And
of
affirmative action never required quotas. There's been a lot of confusion in the marketplace. It required casting a wider net,
right.
attempting to diversify your employee base and make it look more like the labor market from which you recruit. But there's been, a lot of confusion about, what affirmative action is and was. And some organizations probably went a step too far. I mean, that's possible. And many organizations were making good faith efforts to make their workforces more diverse for the good of their business, not just because it was legally required.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated topic. It's a politically sensitive topic. A lot of our members are trying to figure out how to move forward, how to kind of untangle what formerly was their DE&I department or their DE&I initiatives. They're changing the name, and or looking for an appropriate way to term that, to not again become the unwitting or unwilling recipient of any sort of legal concern. So we're eyes wide open, watching what's happening, trying to help our employers do their very best to keep their businesses healthy and thriving in the light of all these changes.
Yeah. Is there anything else in terms of legal blind spots that employers should just have on their radar? Especially, I know you focus a lot in Illinois, but I'm just curious as the state and federal level.
I'll just give a couple more. I mentioned the, Paid Leave for All Workers Act in Illinois. That was pretty darn complicated for people to wrap their heads around and implement. Want to make sure everybody remembers in Illinois you need to do annual anti-harassment training. That is still the law. Some people have erroneously believed that that also got wiped out, but your employees need to get trained once a year, and you know, there's real specifics about how long the training needs to be, what it needs to include. That's still the law. There's still a lot of confusion nationally about the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. So I think that's important that we should make sure that we don't have people that are doing the exact same things, very similar jobs or the exact same jobs, some of who are independent contractors and other who are employees. That's an important area. Got to keep watching minimum wage because that keeps rising and it has a ripple effect across our organizations. We have pay compression, which happens when the bottom tiers keep moving up, but you're not moving the tiers above them. We also experience pay compression when you're hiring from the outside and it's
Sure.
increasingly costly to get new employees, but then your folks who've stuck around and been loyal with you over the years are making the same or less than people you're bringing in from the outside. So that's another area to be, alert about. We also have, many issues with regard. I wrote an article that's coming out next week about, it's Mental Health Awareness Week or month. Sorry, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but a lot of employees are suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD. So we're seeing a lot more employees come forward and ask for accommodations. And so just making sure managers and supervisors know how to talk to employees and that you seek counsel or outside assistance if you need help navigating these issues. Because, accommodation requests, whether they're religious accommodations, mental or physical health accommodations, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Family and Medical Leave Act continue to be challenging for employers and complicated because they're very nuanced. But today's employee is way more willing than they were years ago to come to their employer and say, hey, I need an accommodation because either I'm facing one of these challenges or someone in my family is. How
Right.
can you help me?
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I mean, I think we hear it called work-life balance, but there's just way more of a whole human experience in our workforce today. So it is an interesting dynamic. So are those some of the things that, your hotline would be able to address if people are having questions about, because I feel like that's what happens to employers. It's not, the everyday running of your workforce that is challenging. It's like the nuanced things that seem, oh, we've never had to address that with an employee before. Is that really a law? Are we, those are the things to me that I feel like we're constantly researching, and places like HR Source and SHRM are really great resources to get those types of answers.
Yeah, so many of our hotline calls, and I think we answered about 8,000 last year,
Oh,
are related to specific employee issues, be they performance, leave of absence, applying policies, accessing benefits, but they're often like a specific case. We have an employee who used to be a great performer, but now they're, you know, falling short of our expectations. What can we do? What should we do? How much rope do we give them? And then we talk through with the member. Sometimes it's one of our HR professionals, and sometimes it's one of our attorneys. If
right,
we think right, we're headed towards termination, we don't really use suspensions. I mean, back in the day, suspensions were pretty popular as a part of the progressive discipline process. They're not used as frequently anymore, but certainly verbal warning, written warning, last chance, and then potentially working with a member on a severance agreement if it looks like there needs to be a parting of the ways or an exit strategy. That's what our hotline, that's what we're here for, to help members and deal with these issues, which are so prevalent.
yeah. I mean, they're just so nuanced. I don't have an 1,000 person employee base, but I've been always every year surprised at how many things that have really a specialized issue that we have to think about, and really, think about how it's going to impact the business if we go this way, or we might lose a great candidate if we go that way. So it's complex. It's complex, and it feels like it's likely beyond most internal HR teams to know everything, because there's just too many things that are changing. And even as you employ people outside of the state, it's one thing to know your state's requirements, but if first person you add that's not in Illinois, or it's outside your geography, different rules and parameters apply to that hire. So
And
very,
you bring up a great point. You and I have talked about this before, but employers need to make sure that if they have employees living and have their main address in another state, there are very specific requirements you need to be aware of. And so your employees need to keep you informed about where their residence is. Many members, many employers have decided they're going to have blackout states where they don't allow employees to live because of the complexity of the employment laws, would be too onerous for the employer to comply with. And a lot of organizations don't find out until it's too late that their valued employee, who they don't want to lose, has already pulled up stakes and moved to one of these states. And then they find themselves between a rock and a hard place. So we have sister associations in other states that we often refer our members to. We can also help to a certain extent with issues related to other states, but many payroll providers provide the service. Um, but definitely be eyes wide open. Make sure if you have an employee handbook to put something in your handbook related to knowledge about where employees' main address is, and letting employees know that they can't just move wherever they feel like and be assured 100% of job security. Not that they can ever be 100% assured in most organizations of job security, but that's become much more complicated in recent years.
yeah. I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole with the conversation around immigration and sponsorship, but that has become a hot button topic, obviously, this year as well. What are some of the key things that you're advising leaders on in regards to those two nuances
Well,
in our,
yeah, first of all, I-9 forms. A lot of organizations have not been very consistent or careful with I-9 forms. We have a lot of organizations that are reaching out to us either to come and audit their I-9 forms or to make sure that we review their process to make sure that they're doing them effectively. Um, Other organizations are pretty sure that they have undocumented workers in their workforce. And so they know this because they have experienced absenteeism or they've had ICE agents at their door. So we have provided employers with some helpful resources on employee procedures should that occur. Um, Also, I think many organizations are worried about their employees who might go home for visits and who aren't allowed back in the US. They're also having to look at which employees they send on business trips to countries that might not welcome them any longer and or might make it difficult for them to get back. The number of visas might be changing and is already changing. So a lot of employers who rely upon a foreign workforce are looking at what the future might hold in terms of having those employees consistently able to perform work for their business. We brought in an immigration attorney to our most recent conference just because the number of questions related to immigration and I-9s and ICE raids has just gone north in the last 4 months. And so we're trying to help members to the extent we can. It's a very specialized area of law and really specific to what types of employees you have. But something every employer must do is make sure that they're strictly adhering to the I-9 guidelines and have I-9s filled out for all of their employees that are up to snuff.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. Even, you know, I spent some time over the winter in Mexico, and we're meeting expats that were employed in the States, and just their experience in getting a new job in the U.S. and some of the differences in their experience prior. So you're right. It's super complex. So it's not even just an employer issue. It's also an employee issue if you're choosing to live out of the country and still want to be working for a U.S. Organization. So very, a lot of dynamics going on. So I think it's great that you have that access to specialists on your team, or that there's known specialists to handle those more complex challenges. So I want to, as we're starting to kind of wrap up, I really do want to talk about innovation. And for us, I am seeing more organizations invest in sort of learning and development and upskilling, and innovation and technology and AI are the hot button topics. So it's not just, we want people to learn these new things. It's impacting almost every sector. So talk a little bit about how you're seeing employers approach their learning and development programs. Are they really investing in them, or are they just saying they're investing in them? I'm curious to how, you're seeing people invest, as well as like how technology advancements are impacting those training and learnings.
Well, you can't turn on the TV or open a newspaper or go to a program and not hear AI,
Right.
right? And so, just to speak to that topic, I think organizations need to be transparent about what their expectations are and what their policy is, and also provide guardrails. So, some organizations aren't saying much, and their employees are kind of scared to admit how much they're using it and how they're using it. Other employers are much more open, encouraging, and funneling resources to those people in the organization that are really experimenting with AI, using it. They're sharing use cases at their team meetings. They're shining a bright, positive light on both the things they're learning and the advancements that they're making and the efficiencies that they're finding, but also talking about the landmines that are potential when you're using AI. So, my analogy to our earlier discussion is openness, transparency, talk about it, make it make it something people are sharing and they're not freaked out and scared about, because a lot of what you read in the press are AI's taking over everybody's jobs. Well, it doesn't hurt leadership to come out and say, these are the places in our organization where I think AI is going to help bolster our productivity or improve our performance. It is not going to wholesale wipe out departments here, right? To hear leadership speak to that. I also think it's imperative that organizations talk about all the different ways that they're developing and growing employees. It's not just going to conferences or participating in an MBA program, but who are they allowing to collaborate together on projects? Who are they giving some funds or some time to be innovative? What who are they allowing to partner with each other and have opportunities for speaking engagements, to participate on boards, to serve on committees, to take time out of the workday to do volunteerism, which might allow them for some peer networking or for aha moments that come from interacting with business leaders or professionals at other organizations or in other industries. So, not to think so narrowly about learning and development, but more broadly about e-learning, classroom training, being a mentor or having a mentor. But to talk about in either regular feedback sessions or in an annual performance discussion what all the variations on a theme are and what do your employees want? Like,
Right.
what would be good for them? Sometimes they're waiting for management or leadership to tell them, you need this or you can have this, when I think it should be a conversation about both what the employee wants and needs and what the employer can offer. And I think a lot of times employers, when faced with innovative concepts, are more than willing to provide the opportunity for their employees if they're just asked.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do feel like there has been a little bit more of a trend to tell me what you want me to do and learn, and what should be in my growth path in terms of learning and development opportunities versus, hey, I really think this would be additive to my career progression. It also it is valuable to this company. Can I take it on? So, I'm curious just on that same topic about the hiring then. I feel like there has been, I mean, I've even heard of not, you know, from a ton of people, but I've heard of people not choosing not to graduate from even high school and go into alternative learning opportunities. Is there even an appetite for being more open in hiring practices for alternative learning tracks as part of career progression or entry level positions versus that typical college bound sort of candidate that comes into the workforce?
Yes, definitely. I think the tight labor market probably drove that some years ago. I think you've probably seen the campaigns about breaking the paper ceiling and giving more credence and credit to life experience and not just looking for 4 years college degrees, but being open to associate's degrees or, you know, high school graduates or just GEDs, but not being so rigid about prerequisites. We've worked with many of our members to recalibrate their recruiting process and their screening process to allow a broader opportunity to look at candidates that might have not come up through a traditional track. And I applaud those efforts. And I think many employers are embracing that. And whether or not they first embraced it because they felt desperate and that's what encouraged them to get rid of some of those prerequisites, or is it because they had a family member themselves who did not follow a traditional path, but they know is talented and productive and is hardworking, and that has opened their mind to others who might be in a similar situation. So yes, yes, seeing more of it. Hope I see even an expanded view in the years to come, because back to the silver tsunami, our labor force isn't going to necessarily have enough candidates to fill the spots that are going to be vacated by the boomers. Um, and
Yeah.
so employers are going to have to be more open minded about what they need and maybe hire more for aptitude than for specific degrees.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot to non-traditional learning tracks. I mean, not I love learning, but I too have had a non-traditional education, and so I think that those of us in my era really had to make a way for ourselves differently, and I'm glad that employers are starting to see the value in candidates like that. I mean, I certainly don't know if that I'd want somebody to operate on my brain that has just gone through a boot camp on brain surgery, but
Yeah.
I never say never. If they're the best of the best, I could be open to it. But I feel like there are way more options to being a great employee. And it doesn't always necessarily mean that you took algebra or something like that before you started to work for somebody. Well, we are getting close to the end of our time together. Thank you so much. This was incredible, as always, to hear your perspective, just hear, what you're hearing, because it is so helpful to those of us leading organizations to just kind of be, affirmed that, that other leaders are thinking similarly to us or have resources to learn things that we're struggling with in our own workforce situations. So we want to, tell everybody, if you have a question for Mary Lynn, please reach out to her via LinkedIn or send her a note via email. Put business as unusual in the subject line so she knows that you heard her on today's live stream. And I want to give everyone a heads up about our next business as unusual session. We're going to be talking about sales, and those of us that are in roles that are business development related, we're faced with a lot of challenges. People are so fatigued by receiving these spammy emails. Your phone blows up all the time with telemarketers and solicitors. It's just really tough for sales professionals to break through the clutter. And then there's all this new technology out there. So we are going to kind of bridge the gap of what some of the old school skill sets that you truly need to build relationships, make impact in businesses from a sales standpoint, and how to leverage some of these newer technologies as well. And we're going to have David J.P. Fisher, D Fish, for those of people that know him on LinkedIn, will be joining us. He's going to be our guest. We'll be joined by Tom Latteray from M3 Learning. Tom's team trains sales professionals, so it's going to be a really dynamic conversation. And I want to thank both you, Mary Lynn, and HR Source for being a long-term sponsor of Business as Unusual, and Tom Latteray as well with M3 Learning, to supporting us and bringing such great ideas and content to our audiences. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope people took some great things away from today's session. If you've got questions about how to build a badass brand that people want to work for, please feel free to reach out to any of us at Red Caffeine. Thank you, Mary Lynn. Until next time, let's continue to challenge the unusual, and I can't wait to hear you in our session upcoming later this year.
Thanks so much, Kathy. It's been great.